There is a moment in life when everything you believed about yourself can collapse. It might happen after losing a job you thought you would keep, after a relationship you thought would last forever suddenly ends, after years of working toward a dream you realize the dream is no longer waiting for you, or perhaps nothing dramatic happens at all. You simply wake up one morning and realize that the person you used to be is gone. You look at your life and quietly ask, how did I get here? And maybe the hardest part isn't the failure itself. Maybe the hardest part is wondering whether you will ever become yourself again. But what if you don't need to become the old you again? What if life didn't break you so that you could return to who you were? What if it broke the version of you that could no longer carry the life you are meant to build? Because sometimes the greatest rebuilding begins after the greatest breaking. We are often taught to think about failure as an ending. You failed the exam, you lost the opportunity, the business didn't work, the relationship ended, the money disappeared, the plan didn't happen. And suddenly, one event seems to become a definition of who you are. You don't say, I experienced failure. You start saying, I am a failure. That small change in language can change everything, because an experience is something that happens to you. An identity is something you begin to believe about yourself. And once you believe that something is wrong with you, you stop trying to rebuild. You stop taking risks. You stop dreaming. You become careful. You become smaller. You tell yourself that you're being realistic. But sometimes what we call realism is simply fear wearing intelligent clothing. The truth is, life will eventually break something inside all of us. It may break our plans. It may break our confidence. It may break our assumptions about people. It may break our sense of security. But being broken is not the same as being finished. And today, I want you to consider a different way of looking at the hardest chapters of your life. Not as evidence that you are weak, not as proof that you were never meant to succeed, but as an invitation to rebuild. Our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Confucius. Think about that for a moment. Not never falling, not never failing, not living a life so perfect that nothing ever goes wrong. The glory is in rising. That means your scars don't disqualify you from greatness. Your mistakes don't automatically cancel your future. Your worst chapter doesn't have to become your final chapter. The question isn't whether life will knock you down. At some point, it will. The question is, what will you do after it does? Imagine a person named Daniel. Daniel is not famous. He doesn't have millions of followers. He isn't extraordinary in the way movies usually describe extraordinary people. He's just a normal person trying to build a good life. He works hard. He takes care of his family. He saves money. He has a plan. For 10 years, he believes he knows where his life is going. Then, within a few months, everything changes. The company he works for closes. The relationship he depended on ends. His savings begin disappearing because the job market is difficult. Friends who once called him every week become busy with their own lives. And suddenly, Daniel has too much time to think. At first, he tells himself, this is temporary. Then, I'll figure it out. Then, maybe next month. And eventually, maybe I'm just not good enough. That last sentence is the dangerous one. Because once disappointment becomes identity, hope begins to feel irresponsible. Daniel stops applying for certain jobs because he assumes he won't get them. He stops contacting people because he doesn't want to admit that he's struggling. He stops exercising because he has lost the energy. He stops making plans because plans now remind him of disappointment. Nothing dramatic happens on a particular day, but slowly his world gets smaller. This is how many people lose themselves, not in one giant collapse, but through hundreds of tiny decisions to stop believing that the future can be different. Failure attacks more than your circumstances. It can attack your identity. When you succeed, people often tell you, you're talented, you're disciplined, you're smart, you were made for this. But when you fail, the world becomes strangely quiet. And in that silence, you begin creating your own explanations. Maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I'm too late. Maybe other people are simply better. Maybe I had my chance. Maybe this is all I'm capable of. But failure doesn't automatically tell you what you are. It only tells you that something didn't work. That's all. A failed business doesn't prove that you're incapable of building a business. A failed relationship doesn't prove that you're unlovable. A rejected application doesn't prove that you're worthless. A financial setback doesn't prove that you'll always struggle. A mistake doesn't become your identity simply because it hurts. And this distinction matters, because if you confuse what happened with who you are, you may spend years fighting an identity that was never true. Every human being tells themselves a story. Sometimes the story is empowering. Sometimes it is destructive. Consider two people who experience almost the same setback. The first person says, "I'm unlucky. Nothing ever works for me." The second says, "This didn't work. I need to understand why." Same setback, different interpretation, different emotional response, different behavior, and eventually, potentially, a completely different life. This doesn't mean you should pretend everything is wonderful. Positive thinking alone cannot repair every problem. Sometimes life genuinely hurts. Sometimes you lose people. Sometimes you lose money. Sometimes you make terrible mistakes. Sometimes you are exhausted. You don't need to lie to yourself about that. You need to tell yourself the truth without turning the truth into a prison. Instead of, "My life is ruined," say, "My life has changed." Instead of, "I failed," say, "That attempt failed." Instead of, "I lost everything," say, "I lost something important, and now I need to decide what comes next." Language matters because language becomes thought. Thought becomes behavior. Behavior becomes habit, and habits eventually become a life. When life breaks you, your first instinct may be to fight reality. You think, "This shouldn't have happened. It's not fair. If only I had. If only they had. If only things were different." And perhaps you're right. Maybe it wasn't fair. But acceptance doesn't mean saying that what happened was fair. Acceptance means refusing to spend the rest of your life arguing with the past. You cannot rebuild a house while standing in the ashes and insisting the fire shouldn't have happened. At some point, you have to look at what remains. This is what I have. This is what I lost. This is what I can still control. And this is where I begin. That sentence can change your life. This is where I begin. Not where you wish you had begun. Not where you think you should have been. Not where someone else is. Here, today, with what you have. One of the most painful things about starting over is watching other people move forward. Someone you went to school with buys a house. Someone younger than you starts a successful company. Someone you know gets married. Someone else travels the world. Someone seems to have everything you thought you would have by now. And you look at your own life and wonder, what happened to me? But comparison usually gives you incomplete information. You see their achievement. You don't see their anxiety. You see the photograph. You don't see the years behind it. You see the promotion. You don't see the sacrifices. You see the relationship. You don't see the private struggles. You see the result. You don't see the process. And most importantly, you don't know whether their destination was ever supposed to be yours. Your life is not late simply because someone else's life moved faster. A tree doesn't look at another tree and panic because its branches are different. It grows according to its nature. You have your own timing, your own responsibilities, your own wounds, your own opportunities, your own road. And sometimes the greatest freedom comes from finally saying, "I don't need to win someone else's race." When people are broken, they often want a dramatic transformation. Tomorrow, they will wake up at 5. They will exercise every day, read 50 books, start a company, make millions, change their entire life, and for 3 days, they become unstoppable. Then reality arrives. They become tired, they miss a morning, they lose momentum, and suddenly they feel like failures again. But rebuilding rarely works that way. You don't rebuild your life through one heroic decision. You rebuild it through small promises that you keep. Wake up when you said you would. Take a 20-minute walk. Send one application. Read 10 pages. Make one difficult phone call. Save a small amount of money. Clean your room. Turn off your phone. Go to bed on time. Do one thing you've been avoiding. These actions look insignificant, but psychologically, they say something powerful. I can trust myself again. That is where rebuilding begins. Not with confidence, with evidence. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you create evidence. Evidence that you are capable. Evidence that you are disciplined. Evidence that you can change. And eventually, those small pieces of evidence become self-belief. Many people say, I'll start when I feel confident. But confidence doesn't usually arrive before action. It grows because of action. Think about someone learning to swim. They can read 100 books about swimming. They can watch tutorials. They can study famous swimmers. But eventually, they have to enter the water. The same is true of life. You don't think your way into courage. You practice courage. You don't think your way into discipline. You practice discipline. You don't think your way into confidence. You practice keeping promises. And this is why starting small matters. If your life feels overwhelming, don't ask, how do I fix my entire life? Ask, what is one thing I can do today that makes tomorrow slightly better? One thing, then another, then another. That's how mountains are climbed, not in one leap, step by step. There is something else about difficult seasons that we don't talk about enough. Hard times reveal things. They reveal who stays. They reveal what matters. They reveal which habits were keeping you alive and which ones were simply distracting you. They reveal how much of your identity was attached to your job, your relationship, your money, your reputation, or other people's approval. And sometimes that revelation hurts. But it can also be liberating. Because once you discover that you were building your identity on unstable foundations, you finally have a chance to build something stronger. Imagine a building damaged by an earthquake. You wouldn't simply repaint the walls and pretend everything is fine. You would inspect the foundation. That's what difficult seasons can force us to do. They make us ask, what do I actually believe? What kind of person do I want to become? What do I value? Who do I want around me? What am I willing to sacrifice? What am I no longer willing to tolerate? Those questions are painful, but they are powerful. Let's return to Daniel. Months have passed. He hasn't solved everything. He still doesn't know exactly where his life is going. But one morning, something changes. He stops asking, when will my old life come back? And starts asking, what kind of life can I build now? It's a small change, but it changes his behavior. He updates his resume. He reaches out to former colleagues. He starts exercising again. He studies a skill he had ignored for years. He spends less time scrolling through other people's lives. He starts waking up with one goal each morning, not to fix everything, just to move forward. Some days are good. Some are terrible. He gets rejected. He makes mistakes. He becomes discouraged. But something is different. He is no longer waiting to feel like the old Daniel. He's becoming someone new. And slowly, the person he becomes is stronger than the person he lost. Not because his life became perfect, but because he learned that he could survive imperfection. One of the greatest traps after failure is waiting. You wait until you feel better, until you have more money, until people understand, until you have more confidence, until the timing is perfect, until you're no longer afraid. But perfection is often just another form of procrastination. There may never be a perfect moment. There may only be a moment when you decide, I'm going anyway. You don't need to know the entire road. You need to see the next step. A person walking through a dark forest doesn't need to see the entire path to keep moving. They need enough light to take the next few steps. Life is often like that. You don't need the entire 5-year plan. You need today's decision. What can you do today? Who can you call? What can you learn? What can you stop doing? What can you begin? What can you forgive? What can you release? We often think rebuilding means adding more money, more goals, more knowledge, more achievements, more responsibilities. But sometimes rebuilding means subtraction. You may need to let go of the person you keep trying to impress. Let go of an environment that constantly diminishes you. Let go of an old identity. Let go of resentment. Let go of the belief that your past must determine your future. Let go of the need to explain yourself to everyone. And perhaps most painfully, let go of the version of your life you thought you were guaranteed to have. Because sometimes we don't suffer only because something happened. We suffer because reality doesn't match the story we imagined. The future you planned may not happen, but that doesn't mean no future is waiting. It means you have to write a different one. Imagine receiving a letter that says, you have failed. Now imagine another letter. You have discovered one way that doesn't work. Same reality, different frame. The second version doesn't remove the pain, but it creates possibility. That is what reframing does. It doesn't turn tragedy into something pleasant. It turns pain into information. A rejection can teach you. A mistake can teach you. A broken relationship can teach you. A financial loss can teach you. A period of loneliness can teach you. Even regret can teach you. The goal isn't to become someone who never experiences pain. The goal is to become someone who can extract wisdom from pain without allowing pain to define them. Think about everything you've already survived. There were moments you thought you wouldn't get through, and somehow you did. There were nights when you didn't know what tomorrow would look like. Tomorrow came. There were people you thought you couldn't live without. You lived. There were failures you thought would destroy your future. You continued. There were versions of yourself you thought were permanent. They changed. Look at the evidence. You are still here, and that matters. Maybe you don't feel strong. That's okay. Strength doesn't always feel like confidence. Sometimes strength looks like getting out of bed when you don't want to. Sometimes it looks like asking for help. Sometimes it looks like starting again quietly. Sometimes it looks like saying, I don't know what I'm doing yet, but I'm not giving up. That sentence is strength. There comes a moment in every rebuilding story when you realize something important. Nobody is coming to save the life you are responsible for building. People may help you, people may love you, people may encourage you, but ultimately, you have to take responsibility for the next chapter. And this isn't bad news, it's freedom. Because if your life belongs entirely to other people, your future depends on their decisions. But when you accept responsibility, you reclaim power. You can't control what happened. You can't control what someone else thinks. You can't control every opportunity. You can't control the past, but you can control what you do next. And sometimes that is enough. So if life has broken you recently, don't rush to prove that you're okay. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to smile for everyone. You don't have to immediately understand why it happened. Give yourself permission to grieve. Then slowly begin. Build your body. Build your mind. Build your skills. Build your relationships with people who genuinely care. Build financial stability. Build spiritual or emotional depth. Build discipline. Build patience. Build a life that doesn't depend entirely on external validation. And most importantly, build trust with yourself. Because when you trust yourself, you can walk into uncertain places without needing guarantees. You can fail without collapsing. You can lose without believing you're worthless. You can start again without feeling ashamed. You can say, I have been broken before, and I know how to rebuild. Before we finish, I want you to ask yourself 5 questions. Not tomorrow, today. Question 1. What part of my life am I still refusing to accept? Maybe acceptance is the first door you need to open. Question 2. What story am I telling myself about what happened? Is that story helping you move forward? Or is it keeping you trapped? Question 3. What small promise can I make to myself today? Not 10 promises, 1, and keep it. Question 4. What do I need to let go of? A person, a habit, a belief, an expectation, a past version of yourself? Question 5. If I stopped trying to recreate my old life, what new life could I build? Sit with that question, because it may contain the beginning of your next chapter. Perhaps the deepest lesson is this: you are not required to remain the person you were before everything changed. Life changes, people change, priorities change, dreams change, you change. And that's not necessarily a tragedy. Sometimes the person you were could only survive in the life you had. But the person you're becoming may be capable of surviving and thriving in a life you haven't imagined yet. So don't waste your entire future trying to return to yesterday. Take what was valuable, learn from what hurt, honor what you lost, forgive what you can, release what you must, and then turn toward what is still possible, because there is still something ahead of you. Maybe you can't see it yet. Maybe it isn't obvious. Maybe you're standing in the middle of uncertainty. But uncertainty is not the same thing as hopelessness. A blank page isn't a bad story. It's simply a story that hasn't been written yet. One day, you may look back at this chapter, and you may realize that the thing you begged life to take away was the very thing that forced you to discover yourself. The rejection pushed you toward a better path. The ending taught you how to love yourself. The failure taught you discipline. The loneliness taught you who you are. The loss taught you what matters. The disappointment taught you patience. The uncertainty taught you courage. And the version of you who thought life was over. was simply standing at the beginning of another chapter. So if you're listening to this while your life feels uncertain, if you're rebuilding after a failure, if you're carrying a disappointment nobody else can see, I want you to remember this. You are not finished. You are not your worst mistake. You are not your bank account. You are not someone's rejection. You are not the relationship that ended. You are not the opportunity you lost. You are not the years you think you wasted. You are not behind. You are not disqualified. You are a human being in the middle of becoming. And becoming is messy. Becoming is uncomfortable. Becoming takes time. But becoming is also beautiful. So tonight, or whenever you're hearing this, do something simple. Take a piece of paper, write down 3 things. What I lost, what I learned, what I will build next. Don't write a perfect plan. Just write honestly. Then choose one action, one phone call, one application, one walk, 1 hour of learning, one conversation, one apology, one boundary, one decision, one beginning. Because your new life doesn't need to begin with a dramatic transformation. It can begin with one quiet decision. I am going to try again. And perhaps nobody will notice. That's okay. Some of the most important transformations in life happen quietly. Before anyone applauds, before anyone believes, before there are results, before you even believe in yourself again. You simply keep going. And one day, the world will see what you built in the silence. Maybe life didn't break you to punish you. Maybe it exposed what needed to change. Maybe the ending wasn't proof that your story was over. Maybe it was proof that one chapter was over. Maybe losing your old identity wasn't a tragedy. Maybe it created room for a stronger one. And maybe, just maybe, the person you're becoming is worth everything it took to get here. So breathe. Take the next step. You don't need to have everything figured out. You don't need to know exactly where the road ends. You only need enough courage to take the next step. Then another. Then another. And if you fall again, rise again. Not because falling doesn't hurt, but because your future is still worth fighting for. Remember this. Being broken is an experience. Staying broken is a decision. And rebuilding is a choice you can make, one day at a time. Your past may explain you. It does not have to control you. Your failures may shape you. They do not have to define you. Your wounds may be part of your story, but they don't have to be the ending. So build again. Build slowly. Build honestly. Build with patience. Build with courage. And when the world asks you why you're starting over, you don't need a complicated answer. You can simply say, because I still believe there is more life left to live. If this message spoke to something you're going through right now, don't keep it to yourself. Leave a comment and complete this sentence. I am rebuilding my life by Kong. Maybe your answer is your career. Maybe your health. Maybe your confidence. Maybe your peace. Maybe your relationships. Maybe simply yourself. And if you know someone who is quietly struggling to start again, share this video with them. Sometimes one message arrives at exactly the moment someone needs it. If you want more stories and lessons about resilience, growth, discipline, and becoming stronger through life's hardest seasons, subscribe to the channel. You don't have to rebuild everything today. Just take the next step. Then tomorrow, take another. Thank you for taking the time to listen and for staying with me until the end of this video. May you always keep a peaceful mind, a lighter heart, and plenty of joy in your life. I wish you a day filled with peace, happiness, and success. And if today's message touched something within you, join me as we continue discovering meaningful lessons in the videos to come. I'll see you in the next video.